doesn't really matter. Okay. And then he does all of those things. So from that point of view, at the beginning, the cowboys, natural horsemanship or any cowboy, have kind of a reasonable idea. The horse has to accept the saddle, has to accept the bridle, has to stop, has to stand, has to let you get on, etc., etc. So that qualifies as obedience, right? And obedience is really a horse that moves in whatever direction you want, when you want, right? So most horses, the simplest way to go about it is to make them go forward, right? Because if you look in nature on how horses deal with each other, they chase each other, right? So mares, no parallel there with any other female, are exclusive. They have a club and they don't want anybody else in their club. And everything else who comes in is naturally wrong, because there's the wrong shoes, the wrong makeup, the wrong hairdresser, the wrong car, the wrong husband. Maybe the right husband, but not the wife, right? So the mares, when you bring a new mare in, they chase it. And they chase it, and they chase it, and they chase it, and the poor mare has to stay out, and then she creeps in. And then eventually she's part of the group, and then you bring another new one, and she's in with the other one to chase that one out, right? So the way they manage is to chase each other. Stallions are inclusive because stallions want to own. They want to protect everything, they can't help it. Even though they compete with other stallions, they still want to own them. They want to own every little stallion, every little colt that is not a threat to them. Right? So they chase them to stop them. See, they chase and then they round them up and stop them. That's the same principle at lunging. When you're lunging a horse, you chase him permanently, and he can't stop and he can't get away. So that's perfect control, right? Because normally, if you're in an open space, you chase the horse, he's gone and he's out of reach. But when you're lunging him, he's always in reach. And then you can stop him, so you get everything. You get control, right? So the idea of lunging, which was not derived from any scientific idea of ethology. You guys know what is ethology? Ethology? Yes? Okay. No? Ethology is the science of natural behavior. You know, how animals behave in their natural space, right? And so language is part of ethology. You know, and the, imprinting is a fact of ethology. All of that was worked on by many people, but the main person was a guy called Conrad Lawrence. And if you ever need some reading, you should read books by Conrad Lawrence. He has a book called On Aggression, on how aggression makes the world work. You know, and everything is based on aggression. Right? So for instance, he's the guy who discovered that if you have two dogs at two houses, right, the closer the dog is to his house, the more aggressive he is. Right? Then he goes away from his house, and the further away from his house he is, the less aggressive he is. Then he meets the other dog who is close to his house, and that one is very aggressive. So then he chases him away. You know, and they keep going like that. And if the space is big enough, there's never a fight. But if the space is too small, they meet at a point in the middle where they're both aggressive enough, then they will fight. So if you put two aggressive horses or mares in a paddock, if the paddock is big enough, there won't be a fight. If it's small enough, there will be a fight. Same for fish. You know little fighting fish? Little fighting fish don't fight only if you put them together. Fighting chicken don't fight only if you put them together. Right? Even trees have aggression. You know that? An oak tree poisons the ground around him so nothing grows. So his own corn, acorn, right, doesn't grow within 20 feet of an oak tree. That's why when you go to the forest and you have a big oak tree, there's no underbrush, because he kills them. So that's a question, right? So anyway, so Carl Lawrence, he's the one who discovered imprinting. He's the first one who sat on the geese, and he sat on the geese for 21 days. He didn't figure out, after a while, he only needed to sit on the geese for 1 day, just when they were ready to come, right? And so then the geese came up and said, "Daddy, Daddy," and he's the one who came up with that idea. He's the one who discovered the language of animals, what is innate in language and what is not innate in language, and how birds communicate, and all that kind of stuff. And he got a Nobel Prize for it, and he wrote very good books. So, that aside, we're going to ethology. The interesting thing is that there's now all kind of scientific discoveries about the science of equitation, science of horsemanship, right? And the only thing they're doing is confirming what we've known for a couple hundred years. That principles that work, like horses only learn one thing at a time, not two, right? And so on. I just read the manifesto of the Society for the Advancement of Scientific Equitation, or Science in Equitation, whatever, and it's like, we know this, it's been written before. But people love to spend a lot of money doing research about this stuff. So, anyway, going back to the first question, the first thing you need to get from a horse is obedience. The last thing you need to get from a horse is obedience. Because if the horse is not obedient, you cannot do anything. Right? And so you've got to move his feet. Right? So if I have a big strong mare that comes to my barn, or a young stallion who think he's somebody, right? Usually I don't need to make them go forward, I need to make them go backwards. I need them to give me some ground. Because the young stallion is going to stay in the barn and say, "Who's going to make me move? You? You and who?" Right? And you say, "Well, I will make you move." And then you back him. And once you back him twice around the barn, then after that you just move and he backs. Right? That's the first thing you need, not rhythm. Rhythm is kind of cute, but they forget about all of those other things that you have before. Right? So then brings this question that, let me ask you this question, all of you here. Does any of you want to have a horse that is scared of you? No, you don't want a horse that's scared of you, right? You don't want a horse that's scared of you, right? Have you ever owned a horse that is not scared of you?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Well,
Was he a stallion?
No.
Exactly.
It was.
If you ever own a horse that is not scared of you, you are running out of this barn back to your car.
Right, because I was going to say, actually, she would have been afraid of me.
When you come up with those nice ideas, you've got to think about what the opposite is, right? When I was in Mexico a few years ago, I worked for that guy with about 1,000 horses. And I bought a couple of hundred for him. And he said, "Okay, well, we're going to start a barn for you to train all those good stallions, whatever." So I ended up with 45 stallions. And he said, "Oh, you get this one too?" I said, Why do I have to do? "Oh, just for entertainment, he wanted me to have one too." Right? And so I went to see him, and he was in his stall, and nobody was cleaning the stall. Right? And the top door of the stall was closed, and the bottom was open, because horses can go over the bottom door, but they can't go very well under the top door, right? And they were putting water in there and giving him hay, but nobody was giving hay.
Morning bells, right?
Right. And I'm thinking, So I asked what the story was. So the story was that he sold the horse to Steven Seagal, right? Now Steven Seagal, well, I don't want to get sued, but he's not a very smart or nice person. and he has an ego about the size of this room,
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
when they told him about the horse, the guy said to him, I said, you know, Steve, you shouldn't really have this horse because he's a little bit difficult. Oh, no. Me, Tarzan, me can get organized with that, no problem. I've got a couple of guys on my farms, they'll take care of him. Well, that lasted about a week. So a week later, right, he chased the two guys who were meant to train him out of the arena, and they jumped over the wall, right? So the horse came back, and then nobody wanted to handle him. So eventually the horse comes to my barn with two guys, one on each side, right? And they put him in the stall, and I said, okay, well, tomorrow afternoon we'll deal with the horse, right? By the time I said that, at 4 o'clock, there was 50 people. Everybody wanted to see how the Frenchman was going to be on that horse, right? Everybody, you know, it was like the entertainment of the day, right? So I said to one of my guys, I said, why don't you go and put a bridle on a halter on and bring him out? He said, Patron, you go. You do it. So I'm looking at the horse in the stall, and he's looking at me like this, and he's shaking his head. I'm thinking, this is not so good. So I take a large whip and I move him in the stall like this, right? Just to get a little control over his movement, basically. So he grabs the whip with his teeth and breaks it. I said, well, that's not so good. So I take a broom handle that was there, and, you know, and just try to tap him in the stall to keep making him move. So he kicks the broom handle out of my hand and breaks it in half with the hind foot, right? I'm thinking, this is not good at all. So eventually, I roped him in the stall, right? Got his head out of the stall, put a bridle on, got him out, we put some tack on, and I lunged him, right? And then when I was lunging him, every time I made any signal that he didn't like, he started to cut in. And then he started cutting more and more, and it started to look like bullfighting. Like this. So I'm thinking, this is not going to work, right? So I end up long blinding him, because every time he come for me, then I turn him around, right? And so we managed like that for a little bit, and then I discovered two things that he was scared of. One thing was that if I put a paper bag attached to the lunge line, like 4 feet from his face, he was scared to death of that paper bag, right? And the other thing that gave me control is that if I blindfolded him, which is what people who train mules do. In fact, all classical riding in the 16th, 17th, and 18th century was started with blindfold. Cowboys still do that. If you go and get a Peruvian, a Pasofino bridle, even a Peruvian bridle, they have the blinders on that they used to pull down. So when they saw a young horse, they put blinders on. Driving horses are started with blinders, right? So when you look at all the drawings of Previnel, the horses come in blindfolded. So when they want to get on, they blindfold them, because when the horse is blindfolded, it doesn't move. Then you end up having to trust you, because you're the one telling him where to go. But that paper bag kind of did it, and I never used it enough that he ever got used to it, right? Because if he got used to it, and if I kept using it, he would have discovered the paper bag was not going to eat him, right? Anyway, cut a long story short, I had a very good Australian rider with me, and we ended up riding the horse, and the horse ended up being trained as long as you were not scared of him, right? If you were scared of him, he will take your boot off right out of the stirrup, right? And he will do things that make people go, I don't want to be here. So my point is, if you ever had a horse that is not scared of you, you realize that it's a lot better if they're a little bit scared of you, right? It's like people who say, I'm not scared of the cops. Of course you're scared of the cops. If they arrest you and you don't have insurance and you've drunk a little bit, they're going to put their handcuffs on and you're going to be more than respectful, right? So horses have to have respect, and within that respect, they have to have a little notion that you're bigger than them. If you don't do that, this is not going to work, because they are bigger than you, they're way stronger than you, and they can really hurt you, right? Now, the point is that, that being said, you can't abuse that, right? Children are scared of their teacher and they're scared of their parents to some degree. The children who are not scared of their parents end up in jail at some point, because they don't say yes to anything, and at some point they start to do what you want. They want, not what you want, and then it goes where you don't want to go. So you're parents, so you all know about that, right? So horses are like children on steroids. So, the number one thing you need to have is obedience. And obedience simply means that you can move their feet whichever way you want, away from you, and then that they trust you enough to come to you. And then they realize that the safest place is with you. And horses, the interesting thing that most people in modern horsemanship don't realize is that the stricter you are with a horse, and the more reliable you are the horse, the better they like you. You know, and the more coochie you are, and the more sugar you give them, and the more you kiss them, and the more you let them do what they want, the less they care. If I